Right, hello. Thank you for joining us. This is Dan. I've got much of the PM team, actually, I think most of the PM team here or on this call. And today we're actually going to talk a little bit about Event Grid. The first part of this, I will say when things are not, when things are NDA, the first part of this is not NDA. So unless I say otherwise, you can share the Event Grid section of this talk. When we get to Q&A and we get to other topics, that will be NDA. So please don't share any of that. And I will pass things off to Bram to get started.
How's it going, everyone? Yeah, just to introduce myself, I'm Bram. I'm the PM that was working with Dan on launching Event Grid. So we just want to present to you guys kind of from the basics up what we've been working on for the past year and what we just launched last week. So to set the background, So to set the background, the problem that we've been trying to solve is how to easily and uniformly connect any two services within Azure or external to Azure to allow you to create event-based reactive programming. Currently, if you want to do anything as simple as firing a function off of a storage account or react to some management plane event in ARM, either the service or you have to go do some one-off build. Usually that's something that involves long polling or hammer polling APIs. It's inefficient, it's slow, and worst of all, it takes a lot of dev time to set something up that is not your actual end goal for your product. So what we have done is we've built Event Grid, and what it is a fully managed uniform eventing backplane for Azure. So really all we're trying to do is make events a first-class citizen within Azure. So you can take any service like your Cosmos DB, and you can just basically click and point, and you can aim it at whatever event handler you want to have, whether that's, a logic app, or an Azure function, or Azure automation. So to give you a couple ideas of how to just parameterize what Event Grid really looks like. First of all, it's fully managed. So again, it's just a point and click experience. You don't have to really spin anything up. There isn't even actually an event grid that you spin up. There's only one grid. All you have to do is create event subscriptions connecting A to B. Second of all, everything is near real time. We've put a lot of effort into making the system simple, highly scalable, and very fast. And the last thing is we're working very hard to onboard as many event publishers as well as event handlers throughout Azure, so that you can essentially just kind of take any of the services that you use day to day and point them at any of the other services you want to connect them to, basically breaking down those silos. At the same time, we've actually allowed for custom topics as well as sending events to any generic webhook. So you're not just boxed into the Azure ecosystem, you can actually take Event Grid and connect it anywhere you want. So some of the benefits we have, so it's pay per event, so you don't actually provision some amount of Event Grid, you just pay for operations, the pricing structure of which we can get into later, but it's just you only pay for the amount you use, and if you use a lot, we scale with you, so you don't really have a lot of concerns. It's just kind of, set it up and let it run. At the same time, we've put a lot of effort into making the service highly reliable. We have plans for lots of failover and soon coming features to allow to make sure that you can run your important jobs on Event Grid. But even now we have we have retry with exponential backoff for up to 24 hours with event delivery. So even if your service or endpoint is down, that doesn't mean you necessarily lose your events. So this is kind of from a conceptual level what Event Grid looks like. You have a list of event publishers and event handlers, and within the UI or through Azure CLI, you can basically go and say, hey, I want to listen to this topic, whether that's your resource group for management events or your event hub to listen to capture events, or you want to create custom events. You create an event subscription on that, pointing it to an event handler, and then you can either through Logic Apps in UI, you can just kind of create a flow to do anything from, send my security team an email when a new user is added to my Azure subscription, to in Azure Automation do something like when a new Cosmos DB instance is spun up, I want to go make sure that the proper security checks are enabled for that. So this is the UI blade, actually, just to give you an idea of what the flow kind of looks like. This blade will be popping up all over the Azure ecosystem. Currently, you can see it integrated in the Event Hubs blade, as well as if you click in more services within the Azure portal, you can search for Event Grid and look for Event Grid subscriptions, and you can go create new subscriptions here. And again, you just choose your topic type, which is your publisher. You choose your subscriber type, which currently everything is webhook based, even functions, logic apps, and automation. Eventually those will all become first-class citizens. And you can set a series of optional filters, whether that's your event type or the prefix or suffix filter on the subject, things like that. So just to give you an idea of what we're aiming for, some of the target performance metrics we are hoping to achieve are sub-second latency in the 99th percentile, the ability to handle 10 million events per second per region, as well as 24-hour retry with exponential backoff for events that are not delivered. And we have plans to enable even more features around those events that are not being delivered to make sure that you always know where your events are. So currently, publishers and subscribers that are available, Blob Storage has a caveat in that it's under a gated preview. The instructions, which will be available in the next day or two on how to sign up for that. But the other publisher types are immediately fully available. Resource groups and Azure subscriptions, of course, being management events happening in the context of either of those. Event hubs, you can listen to capture events and custom events. You create a custom topic, as we've talked about, and you can send events from any application that you build to Event Grid and use its filtering, routing, and reliable delivery. Current subscribers, functions, logic apps, and automation all have built-in webhook handling capabilities, so you get them right out of the box. Functions and logic apps have actually gone in and built custom bindings for Event Grid. So those are some of the things that are immediately available. On webhooks, if you're sending to a generic webhook, you need to be aware that we have a webhook validation event, the documentation for which is on docs.microsoft.com. But essentially, the webhook handshake, just to verify that you own the endpoint that you're aiming Event Grid at, is relatively simple. We will send a validation event as the first event you receive to that endpoint, and we'll have a validation code. And all you have to do is echo back the validation code as a validation response, and then we know you have ownership of that endpoint, and you are good to move forward. coming soon, we're working on a number of Azure services to onboard even more publishers and event handlers. So to talk through a couple of the main scenarios we see as important to Event Grid, the first is serverless. So serverless is a relatively new player in the world of cloud computing, but it's growing quite quickly and will be very important in the coming months and years. The basic tenets of serverless are pay for what you use, you don't manage your servers, and event-based compute. So what we're doing for serverless is we are bringing the event to the event-based compute part of that. So this means, the classic scenario is I have something change in my storage account. I want to fire my serverless compute engine in Azure. That's Azure Functions. How do I fire that off? Well, currently that is a polling based underneath the covers, whatever cloud service you're looking at. It's a polling based system, and it's not particularly efficient. So we have integrated natively with storage such that you can fire instantaneously and with no polling as soon as an event occurs, a change occurs in your storage account. But you can send those events to any place you wish. The next area that we see Event Grid being useful is ops automation. So there's a lot of things you can do. You can do kind of basic tasks that are currently done by humans that are error prone. So let's say I spin up 100 new VMs and I need to just go tag all of those and also put information about them into a metadata store. Currently, there's no really smooth, easy way to do this, but with Event Grid, you can now put an event subscription on your resource group, and every time a VM is spun up in your resource group, you can send that event to Azure Automation or Functions and go programmatically tag your VM, as well as put data about that VM into whatever metadata store you have. At the same time, if compliance and security is an issue, when you spin up a new instance of any service, you can just have a boilerplate piece of code that just checks that the correct security and authorization configurations are enabled on that service, and just go check programmatically every single time to make sure that you never have a security leak via human error on that front. The third area is third-party integration. So this is why we've built custom topics and we allow pushing to generic webhook endpoints. This allows you to do quite a few things. One, if you just want to leverage Event Grid's filtering, routing, and reliable delivery and build everything else yourself, you can do that. Or if you want to publish your events to Grid and have something like Logic Apps handle that, that's also an option. And basically, Grid is just really opening up the ecosystem and allowing you to connect anything to anything else. So, how much is it going to cost? So as I went over earlier, we're doing a per operation pricing model. So currently, we're charging 30 cents per million operations during preview, but it will be 60 cents per million operations in GA. An operation is any ingress into Event Grid. So when event publisher publishes an event out. Advanced matches, so that's if you're using the suffix filter and other things to come. And every time we make a delivery attempt, that is also an operation, as well as management calls. The first 100,000 operations are also free every month, and just to make sure that you're not trying to create and delete millions of event subscriptions a day, the management operations are throttled to 10 per second. And currently there is a limit of 1,000 event subscriptions per account, per Azure account, but that will be evaluated again in the future. So to give you some resources, if you want to just jump straight to our product page, you can go to azure.com/eventgrid. For questions, we're hoping to keep all of our questions as in a public forum. So we've decided to try using Stack Overflow so that, if one person asks a question, we're sure, there are probably 10 other people who have the same question. So aka.ms/grid questions just will link you to our Azure-Event Grid tag in Stack Overflow. And finally, if you have questions that you don't feel are appropriate for a public forum, feel free to contact us privately using askgrid@microsoft.com.